this memory flash back into my mind the other day about when I was a kid. We lived a long block away from a library, and being the true nerd that I was, I used to love to bike to the library. Just, oh boy, I can't wait to read more about the Roman Empire. And this one bike ride I got, and this was pretty serious, this Rottweiler really chased me. Came out of nowhere like a bolt of lightning from a yard and just chased me all the way to the library. And I got home and I told my brother, and he's like, let me tell you how you fight off a dog on a bike, right? Just a 12-year-old telling a 9-year-old or whatever I was. I was 10, so he was probably 16, 17, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Just whatever a 16-year-old thinks is a great way to fight a dog. I don't remember what it was, but so it got me thinking, though, that I would love to see how big of a wild animal Brad Geiger could successfully fight off. Like, what's the biggest animal you could conceivably fight off? And so let's start it off. If we started with a hamster, you obviously could beat a hamster, right? A wild hamster.
A hamster in the wild. Yeah, even if it was in the wild, I think what you do in that kind of case is you put him in his little wheel. And you turn the wheel from the outside and crank it really, really fast until he just expires of exhaustion. Hamsters are pretty easy.
I love the idea that a hamster in the wild are like, well, let's construct a wheel. That seems like a great way to just.
Yeah, that's inbred into their DNA. They see a wheel, they've got to climb in there and start running, and
you know what's funny?
You can use that against them.
I have no idea where a hamster is from. Like, what is the natural environment of it? I feel like hamsters naturally have developed little condos with little HOAs, and they all go to do their accountancy job. Like, what does a hamster do in the wild? Where are they? What are they doing?
I think they're all from Papua, right?
Papua?
Papua New Guinea. Yeah, that's because they're also called guinea pigs, right?
Oh, Brad Geiger this has been ComicLab. Brad Geiger. Can I tell you, the 10-year-old version of me that's biking to the library is so happy you just shared that right now. That was great. So anyway, okay, so you could take a guinea pig, but could you take
a hamster or a guinea pig? I could take either one of those.
A hamster or a guinea pig. Let's go bigger. Could you successfully fight off a crow if it was dive bombing you?
A crow,
well, maybe
no.
A crow
what?
is too big. Let's start with a pigeon. A city pigeon suddenly has it out for you. You've walked too close to their nest, and there's got 3 eggs in it, and they're like, no, Brad Geiger. Could you successfully fight off a dive-bombing pigeon?
You know what? Pigeons, I think I could. If I could capture one, I could easily best it in a battle. But pigeons are very, very, very laid back. Like, even if you happened upon a pigeon nest, I could not see them putting up a fight. Pigeons are much more like they'll walk past you on the street and give you the side eye. That's the most violent that they'd ever get is they'd maybe coo at you crossly.
You're right. A pigeon is kind of like nature looked at a bird and said, what if I gave that bird Valium? What if that bird could just walk around on Valium all day long? What would that be like?
What if I gave Valium wings that it pretty much refused to use? Like that, you don't even see pigeons fly. What I want to know is what flies more, a chicken or a pigeon? Because neither one of them spend a whole lot of time flying.
It is delightful when you do see a pigeon kind of half-heartedly fly down steps. It's like, that's my exercise for today. Well, I've done my part for king and country.
Yeah, pigeons are kind of like 45-year-old guys. You know, they're kind of like, all right, that's enough. One push-up, that's plenty. Let's see what's on Sports Center.
Can I say, speaking as a 45-year-old guy, too close to home, Brad. Too close to home.
Well, the worst you're ever going to do is coo at me.
Okay, so far you've bested 2 of the animals that I've presented to you. Now let's get a little bigger. What about a fox? Now, a fox is not technically a big animal. They're about the size of a small to mid-sized dog, but they're wiry little suckers. They're like the scrappy kid that can fight well, but they're very fast. They're going to dive into a hole. if you try to get them.
That's the problem, is that they've got those burrows. Now, see, the fox, they've got like little sharp needle teeth. So you've got to be careful. Oh, do I have any tools? Like, can I dress?
Yes, Brad, your tool is nature's best evolved brain in all of Earth's history. That's your tool.
All right. So I'm going to dress for the occasion, wear something that they can't bite through necessarily. So now I could.
I love the idea of you fighting a fox, but in a beekeeper's outfit. Like, bring it on. You can't bite me.
I'm using my brain.
I'm using the tool that nature gave me.
At which point he just lifts up the hood of the beekeeper's mask and bites my nose.
Exactly. He just lifts up the little flap of your neck and he goes right for the jugular. You're like, oh, well, I had a good run. That fox wins.
No, I think fox has an edge because of those little burrows. I saw this on YouTube. There was this dog that was chasing him. He'd go in one hole and out the other, and I was as confused as the dog. I didn't know where that fox was going to come out.
This does not speak well for your education. Where you're like, any phrase that ends up with "I was as confused as the dog," well, you're in trouble then.
Well, you remember that one time you threw a ball and I went to go get it, but it turned out you still hold it in your hand. I'm still trying to get over that.
Brad was in my bushes for a week going, no, it's around, tail wagging. I know it's around here somewhere. Okay, so using math, we've figured out that you can't best a fox then. That's how far we got. I thought we were going to get further into this list.
Oh, is there? You mean there's more? What do I got? What do I got to fight next? A shark?
Well, there is technically all of nature potentially on that list. But we figured out that you end up really at fox. Fox is like, nope, can't go any further.
I thought, well, thank God we didn't go around a squirrel. I think I would have been done even faster.
A lot of rabies on a squirrel, Brad. You could end up. I love the idea though that you nuzzle into bed tonight. You're like, honey, don't worry, I can keep us safe from any guinea pigs that come by.
That's right. That's right. If there's any roving packs of wild guinea pigs, I've got it under control.
You just tear off your shirt, but very slowly.
I always tear off my shirt slowly in the bedroom. It's a rule. No rushes to nakedness when you're living with me. I gotta let people kind of warm up to the concept.
Just to let everyone know, this is a possibility. This shirt might come off. Well, on that uncomfortable note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So, Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. So, Brad, it is we're all already coming up on Christmas here. We got a couple weeks left, and so it's an exciting time to be alive. So, I
want you to know, Dave. I want you to know I've gotten the message. I got the message.
You got the. What does that mean?
Listen. I'm going to tell our listeners about this, whether you like it or not. I keep getting these voicemail messages from Dave. Beep. Hey, Brad, how's it going? I just wanted you to know, Cintiq 22 HD, that there's no problems with us recording this Tuesday. If you want to get together, we can make sure it's a 22. I like the 22 Pro. I want to make sure that everything is good. We'll talk to you later, Cintiq 22 Pro. And I want you to know your subliminal messaging is getting through just fine. I'll make sure that there's, if at all possible, there's one under the tree for you.
I want you to know that I have dropped the ball clearly because I was trying to say 32-inch Pro. That's what I was trying to say.
Listen, beggars can't be choosers.
Well, listen, since we're coming up on the end of our 2019 Wacom sponsorship of the podcast, what in your ideal world, what would be your dream Cintiq to get under the tree this year?
Well, this is good because my wife does listen to the show. I
love that this has all been a long con, this entire 2 years of podcasting just to get your wife to buy you a Wacom. That's great.
Listen, I wouldn't even be like super fussy and super difficult and say that I needed a Pro 32, although it would be nice, but I wouldn't be one of those guys. If I got a Pro 24, that would be literally twice the screen size that I'm using right now, and it would be luxury. So I would be a happy little cartoonist with a Pro 24.
And think about how well you could fight off a fox with it. Like you could, with a swing of that thing.
Yeah, it's got a longer base, so you get some nice torque. You catch him surprised, and you can ring his bell.
Yeah, it's like and if you attach an arm to it, it's like that Aztec weapon that like extends the throw of an arrow, or javelin, whatever that thing was.
Just a little aside to Wacom. If you're thinking about upping your sponsorship, who else is going to give you a sponsorship that tells you that you could kill their fox with their product? Nobody else is going to give this to you. If you think you're going to get this through another podcast, forget it. You're not getting fox killing tips.
So heads up for Nike, Chevron, and Pepsi. If you want to sponsor the podcast, you're going to get your fox-related murdering techniques out on the show.
Could you imagine what you could do with like a Hyundai? You could.
Yes, I can imagine what you could do with that. You could straight up run over a fox.
Yeah, well, no, you could go even. I could get further into your little test. I could go to badgers and raccoons and maybe even a deer. If I aim right.
For some reason, I thought your weapon of choice was going to be a soda where you're going to be like, you could dissolve a fox in Coca-Cola overnight.
The problem is getting them to sit there.
No, sit still. Sit still. This is a school project. Sit still.
Yeah. Luckily, foxes are really good at Netflix and chill. So if you get something good, binge worthy on the TV, they might sit for a while.
They love a good Paul Rudd show like I do, so that's good.
What was our sponsorship again?
Since you kindly asked what I wanted for Christmas, Brad, thank you for that. By the way, that friendship really comes through, and you turning it around and being like, "But Dave, let's focus on you for a second."
Are you? You still here?
So I would actually go with a smaller one. Since I have the big one on my desk, I think it'd be kind of fun to have one of the smaller mobile ones, like a 13-inch, 16-inch for those Cintiq Pros. Why are you laughing?
Since I've already got one of the larger ones, I'd like to see how the other half lives and slum it a little bit with a 12. I'd like to see if I could challenge myself to draw with a 12.
When did I become the millionaire from Gilligan's Island? Lummy, Gilligan, I'm going to go get a Wacom Cintiq Pro.
Since I can't draw with coconuts, I might as well use a 12. I'm telling you, that 12 is, I've got two of them, and they are workhorses. I love them. And if you went with something smaller like that, I'm telling you, you'd realize that maybe you don't need all that screen size. You'd never go back.
Yeah, I think there's something cool to the portability about it.
And then you'd send that big one to me.
Well, Merry Christmas, Brad. I just lean out a window and I go, boy, what day is it? It's Christmas Day, sir.
And then you just throw your Cintiq out the window at him.
And I accidentally hit a fox. Well, on that note, we want to say thank you to our sponsors for the rest of 2019, the good folks of Wacom over at wacom.com, wacom.com. Go check them out, and we thank them again for sponsoring the podcast. And Bradley J. Geiger, I'm going to jump right into a question for this week. This comes in from Adam over at patreon.com/ComicLab, and it says, Brad and Dave, what are your thoughts about creating comics for a comics audience versus creating comics with the intent of selling the media rights to a streaming service or a movie studio? Is there a gray area? And then Adam goes on. The odds are hardly in a creator's favor to land a deal, but I've seen comics and comic adaptations recently that seem to be positioning themselves to sell off the work. I myself have been approached by film students from prestigious university programs to illustrate their story, and personally, I didn't feel like their heart was into the process of making good comics in the first place. Thanks for the exceptional podcast. Brad, you are exceptional. And I imagine your answer is going to be exceptional. So what do you think about this central question about creating comics as comics or creating comics with the intent of selling the media rights?
Wow. So we're going for this is actually really interesting. We're going from talking about killing foxes to make a killing at fox.
Oh, Brad Geiger, my
Wow.
goodness. Well, that's been Comic Lab for this week. Brad Geiger has been your delightful host. Not only did he kill a fox, he's a fox that kills.
No, I've got problems with this. In other words, I don't want to cast aspersions at anybody that takes this route because I know somebody from way back, and he had it kind of down to a little bit of a science. If I remember right, and this is going back maybe almost 10 years, if I remember the story correctly, he would make a bunch of these concepts and then make for stories like books. And then it would be, the story about the kid that did this and the dragon that did that. And he would illustrate the cover of the book and he would shop them around to movie rights people. And then if anybody nibbled, he would hurry up and make the book. Like all it was like vaporware. The book didn't exist until somebody showed an interest in it. Then he would hurry up and do the book with the idea that they were going to buy the film rights to the book and, of course, hand it off to a screenwriter. The first thing the screenwriter does is throw the book away and do what they want to do based on that basic concept anyway. And he was doing okay doing this. And it was like, it just was kind of like this non-ending process of creating vaporware comics for film rights.
Right.
The only problem with that for me, and again, I don't cast aspersions on any business plan that anyone's got to put food on the table. For me, it wasn't a good fit because my idea has always been build your own IP. Have control over your own IP. That IP that you've built is going to be your retirement fund because you can continually repackage it and resell it and do different things with it. And so I put all my time into building my own property and also just for my own mindset, I could not be interested doing that. That would get boring to me really quick. Doing all these covers for books that never get created.
I feel like it's you really hit the nail on the head there. Hit the head. That sounds very different. You really hit the nail on the head there when you said vaporware. That's an interesting term as to what this is. It really is vaporware. Of like it's a hand waving magician. Like, oh, there's something special in this box, but that kind of thing.
It's Schrodinger's comic. It's not there until you open the cover.
Schrodinger's well, yeah, and then just to give people a little bit of comics history, there have been I want to say 2, maybe even 3 or 4 companies, mainly in Los Angeles, that are quote-unquote comics companies, Brad. And we don't need to name names, but they exist purely to become IP farms to sell on the rights to Hollywood. And they've succeeded with a few, and a little bit of casual Googling can tell you who they are. But it's also true. Sometimes I even sense it from bigger comics like an IDW or an Image, or I'm like, this title was created to sell it to Hollywood. That's what this does. No one cares about this. They want to sell this on. And my reaction to this, and I always come to a little Pollyanna-ish attitude about this, but I am someone who loves comics as an art form, as a medium, right? To me, that has value and an endpoint that is itself a worthy goal. Like, I love what comics can do that nothing else can do. And so for me, when comics are being cheaply used, to Brad's point, like a vaporware to get to something else, it feels, it kind of breaks my heart because comics can and should and are so much more than just being a vessel to go do something else. You know? It's also like, there are better ways to make money, I guess is another way to say this. Like, if money is your true concern, if you don't want to be in comics, if it's just money, then go get a job at a Fortune 500 company. And within 5 to 10 years, you'll be a mid-level VP, that's you're going to have a 401k, you'll have better healthcare, and you'll have a nice income, that kind of thing. But if you want to be in comics, really what you want is you want to tell, in a world that has very market-tested stories, you want to tell an individually crafted story that's only from you. and that feels like it's from your heart, and there's joy and mistakes and all the hiccups that comes with a non-market tested story, right? Like Drive has 1,000 imperfections. I think I can say with Friendship that Evil Inc. has a few dozen imperfections.
Yeah.
Like we all have hiccups because it's an individually crafted piece of art, but our heart and our soul is in it. When you read Evil Inc., you feel the love that Brad has for it. Hopefully when you read Drive, you feel the love that I have for it, because love is the active word there. We're having fun telling this story that only we could tell, and in only the way we could tell. So when someone uses comics as a stepping stone, like frankly a shitty stepping stone to get to somewhere else, it rings hollow, and it makes me sad for what comics could be in that artist's life, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's also, at what point, where does the career arc end for that? In other words,
that's a great, okay, let's talk about that. Yes.
You've succeeded in selling the movie rights to this book that doesn't exist, and a book that you cranked out in 48, 72 hours, however long you had to do it, to capitalize while they were interested. But there was really no book, and if there was a book, it maybe isn't a very good book, because how good could it be? You sell the movie rights. You're not really a player in that in Hollywood.
So Brad, just finish that thought. You sell the movie rights, and then you're immediately excluded from anything after that. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's my point. You're not a player. You're a commodity. So now, basically, once that's done, you might have if the film gets made. And Dave, you can tell us because you're a lot more close to this than I am. What are the chances? Just in a hypothetical, this person sells movie rights. What are the chances of that actually being made and then distributed to audiences?
Very, very, very small, Brad.
Yeah.
And you and I know cartoonists, and just evidence to back this up, who have sold the same movie rights 3 or 4 times because guess what? The 3 years expired and nobody did anything with it. And then it got back on the market, got sold again. And, you know, the dirty little secret is the money is not what you think it is. Like if you're like, I'm going to buy a new gold car with the rights to this movie.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about Hollywood. The rates are highly dependent on who you are when they buy a movie. So if you are a nobody with a title that has not succeeded on the New York Times bestseller list or some market tested item, then you're going to get not great rates on when you sell that property to Hollywood.
That was my point. I guess that's my point, is that the book never happened. Right? So let's say if it was that you sold the movie rights to a book that you put a couple years into and is a good book, and that book is out there selling. And not only do you have the movie rights, but you've got book sales to back you up. And so now you can go to the second book and you can sell that book to the audience that the first book owned and potentially sell movie rights to it if that's what you want to do. Now you've built a career. Now you've got a career that is on solid footing with 2 different audiences. You've got the book buying audience, and you've got people in Hollywood that see you as somebody that is doing something that has value, because not only do they look at the film rights that you've sold, but they look at the books that you've sold, and they see that you've got the ability to make an audience happen. That has value. Right. But vaporware comics, I don't throw any stones at anybody that wants to do that, but I would never make that choice for me because, man, that seems like too great of a risk.
Yeah, and so let's talk about some historical things. Have entire pitches been sold based on a title? Absolutely.
Yes.
Have entire pitches been sold based on a log line? 100% that's happened. But most of the time, is that because it's also a log line from a seasoned professional who they know has the goods to back it up?
Right.
Yes, that's more often than not the case. So I'll use my own wife in this circumstance, and I don't think she'll mind. When she was in her 20s and 30s, she might have sold 1 or 2 things as a pitch, but the rate was 1/100th of what it is now in her career.
Right.
And also, it was very unlikely to go anywhere because it's like, who's this Gloria person? And then even if it did, it stumbled along because no one had the oomph to sell it based on her name or her track record.
Yeah.
Now she can get things made, and she has a track record of having made good things that got really critically reviewed well in Variety and Deadline and New York Times and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So that has an ability like a snowball rolling down a hill. They know when they write that check, Gloria can help snowball this project. Her own reputation, her word, her name. So if Gloria came with vaporware, even if she brings in vaporware, they know that her own standing, her own career can help get that ball rolling.
Yes.
Whereas if I or Brad come in with vaporware, they're like, "Who's this idiot? Who's this schmuck coming in with this vaporware?"
Wait,
all right, maybe we'll spend $5,000 to $10,000 and buy it from them, but just so we lock it down. But we're not going to do anything with it. That kind of thing.
And at the end of the day, all you've got is a cover of a book that has never been produced. Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing you've got. And you can't spend any time on that book because you're busy making another dozen books, covers, for the next go-round. And you're constantly on this carousel that you can't get off.
It's also, I think it's a misplaced egotism of what you can accomplish based on how comparatively little you know about an industry. For example, Brad and I know a lot about comics, and we know it's hard to make it in comics.
Yeah.
But there's in both Brad and my mind, because we know less about Hollywood, we can a little bit ascribe that it's an easier path, quote unquote. You know what I mean by that, Brad?
Right.
We're like, oh boy, it'd be really hard to sell a book to Marvel right now, but I bet I could sell something to Paramount. This could definitely go.
Yeah.
And anybody who's in the know is like, you're not going to sell that to Paramount. Like, what are you go back to comics? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So like, a title like Saga, that's absolutely going to get made. A title like Why the Last Man, that's absolutely going to get made. My vaporware comic about a Western that is a space thing, and no one's going to buy that until I actually do something with it, you know? So anyway, Brad, also, really just to get back to my original point, it a little bit breaks my heart. You go into comics because you want to craft individual stories or small team stories that can't be told elsewhere. And that is a special gift in art. There's very few art forms that allow for that. If I wanted to make more money, I would go work in TV with my wife and be noted to death and work on a team that's large and have to course correct my script a lot, it has its own joys, but that's not for me. I want to tell individually crafted stories, even if they have faults and hiccups and freckles, you know?
Yeah, it's being I guess, for lack of a better word, a rugged individualist, or somebody who really, really loves the idea of doing an individual expression, as opposed to somebody who thrives off of being part of a creative team.
Yeah. And also, I really want to emphasize that it is infinitely harder than you think to sell that pitch to Hollywood. Just to recontextualize it, it's like me saying, Brad, you know what? I'm doing Drive mainly to make it easier for me to get into the NBA. Because they're gonna open those doors. They're going to want Dave Kellett as a forward. And he's going to be amazing, a power forward. I'll be on the Houston Rockets. It's going to be great, Brad. I mean, so just recontextualize what you sound like when you're like, I'm making this comic and I'm absolutely going to sell it to Paramount. There's no question about it. Someone's going to option this. It's like, there's a lot of people from all over the world at any given point pitching things to Hollywood. Slow your roll there, champ.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's going to be permutations to this that you have not experienced yet.
Now, having said that, am I at some point going to try to pitch Drive? Yes.
Sure.
But I know from my wife's career that she has pitched 40 things so that 10 things have interest, so that 5 things have sold, you know? And so the statistics are still well against Drive that I will ever do anything with it. I would like to think that I could do it, but I'm not, my self-worth as an artist and my creativity as an artist is not dependent on me eventually selling it. I'm making Drive to make Drive. And then the nice bonus at the end is, hey, I might be able to sell it, but probably not, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And your career isn't dependent upon that.
Yes. So I think, Adam, to answer your question, Brad, I think we could put a button on this.
Yeah.
I think make comics for comics' sake. And if a nice twist ending can happen where you end up selling it on for media rights, how delightful. Oh, look, it became a video game. Oh, look, it became a movie. But really, you made the comics because you wanted to make the comics. I think that's where we'd come down on that.
Absolutely.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. So, Brad, coming out of the break, I just wanted to share something with everybody that I think we've talked about this on the side, and it delights us. So we had promised everyone a Drunk ComicLab episode, which is kind of fun. It's basically just Brad and I enjoying a glass of wine and talking comics while a little bit more tickled in the ivories. What was I going to say? I don't know what I was going to say there.
You're going to get tickled in.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. No, just the idea that it's a little bit of a goofier show, a little bit more of giggling and delight. And that's just an exclusive to say thank you to Patreon. But the funny part is, Brad and I are like, all right, when are we going to do this show? And we both get out our calendars. And I'm not kidding, friends, when I say we were looking 4 weeks out and we couldn't find a day where both of us had time to get drunk. That's how old we are, is that we can't even schedule a time to have a glass of wine.
How sad, Dave, how sad would your 25-year-old self be to find out that this is what you've become? You can't even schedule a time to get drunk.
I don't know. I mean, it's a fun little marker to put down on your life. Where you're like, nah, I got too many responsibilities to even have a sip of wine. Can't do it. There was one day where we were both free, and then you're like, no, the next morning I got a thing.
Yeah.
If I have a drink the night before, my sciatica will act up. I can't do it.
Yeah, one of them was a Sunday night, and I'm like, I can't do that. I got to go to school on Monday morning.
Exactly.
I mean, it's teaching instead of learning, but still, I gotta be up and talk on my hind legs, talking in front of people for 6 hours. So
it was a real eye opener that we are not 21 anymore. We're like, no, Brad, I can't pencil you in to have a glass of wine. I'm sorry, my friend, I can't do it. There's no way to look, Brad. I've got some accountancy to catch up on. I can't do this.
At one point, we were trying to stagger shift it. Like, okay, you can get drunk between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. I can get drunk at 5 to 7. If we meet in the middle, you'll still be a little bit drunk, and I won't be quite as drunk. And it's like, no, none of that's going to work.
Becoming an old and boring and responsible adult. There we go. So I just thought people would appreciate that we literally looked 3 or 4 weeks out on the calendar and have yet to find a date that we can both land on. So there we go.
Hopefully by the time you're hearing this, we will have found that date.
Yeah, exactly. I guess Christmas night I'm calling you, Brad. Christmas night.
That wouldn't be the first. Actually, Christmas Eve usually is the best time to get a little soused. But that's when I got to ask you this. Did this happen with you when your kids were smaller, even smaller than they are now? You got to put together all of those toys Christmas Eve. Like they had the toys that had to be put together, assembled before you could give them to them. Now my kids, it's like, here's a small cartridge, put in your video game. Here's a gift certificate to download the next video game. But when they were small, you had to put all this stuff. You had bikes and swing sets and all this stuff you had to put together. And that's when I would get completely blotto because I couldn't read those instructions. I hate putting stuff together. I'm bad at it. If I put a tricycle together, it always ends up with 4 wheels. I don't know where I got the 4th wheel, but it's there. It's always wrong. I've always got to put it together and then tear it apart 3/4 of the way because I did something wrong in the second step that now is glaring. Did you ever get drunk on Christmas Eve?
No, not drunk, but I will tell you this story. So when I get frustrated, I start to sweat. And there was a Christmas Eve where I was putting together, when they were younger, this big honking toy that was like, it was like designed by Germans who torture people. Like it was like 58,000 parts and just like, whoa, who designed this? Why is it so complicated? And I'm not kidding, Brad, that I was getting more and more frustrated. So I was sweating more and more. I was like, getting out different wrenches, trying various points of pressure to put this thing together. Yeah. Anyway, my wife, it's just me out in the living room, Christmas lights on, at 1 a.m. At 1 a.m, she comes out and I'm on my knees with wrenches in my hand facing this thing in my underwear because I've been sweating so much that I just peeled off all my clothes. And she comes out and she's like, what is happening out here? What is going on? I'm like, I'm putting together this thing. This is driving me nuts.
I hate Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Go back to bed.
You got the Grinch on TV just so you can identify with him.
Just freeze framing on that one frame where his mouth frowns. Just so I can look up in synchronicity and go, "You're right, Grinchy.
You're right, Grinch. Yeah, this whole thing stinks."
This mood raises the next topic that I wanted to bring up because this being one of the sadder moments in my life, I wanted to talk about Autobio comics because for everyone familiar or not familiar with Autobio comics, it's a unique subset of comics where someone usually takes a snippet from their life, a year from their life, a couple of years from their life, a day of their life, and creates a short story around their autobiographical tale, right? But I wanted to ask you why you thought this was the case, that all and maybe I'm wrong, I'd love to be wrong, but virtually all Autobio comics are the saddest story that you can imagine. You're like, is there no cartoonist that wants to tell a happy autobiographical story? Or maybe just in terms of storytelling, there's no drama there, so why tell a happy story? But every time I pick up an autobiographical comic, I'm always like, well, I'm getting ready to cry. Here we go. This will be fun.
Oh, look, my favorite Autobio comic just updated on Facebook. Let me go take a look here. Still unemployed. I thought I might have a job, but turns out I don't. Tune in tomorrow. Okay, let's click on the next one. Oh, got a job, but this place really sucks, and no, now it's over. And it's like, oh my God, what's going on here? Why am I reading this? This is horrible. Yeah, why do they focus on all of the? I mean, listen, why do they focus on the bad stuff? Because that's the drama, and I get it. But you'd also have to assume that there are at least a few people who'd like to do an Autobio comic that have had some somewhat happy things happen in their lives.
Yeah, it's weird how you can look at the history of American comic books in comic book shops, and you can see how we ended up with capes and cowls, right? Like, because you had the 1950s scare of like, oh, the communists are trying to get kids with horror comics, and they're trying to get kids with romance comics and all this and that. And then TV took away the Western because it was more exciting to watch it on TV than to read a comic about a Western.
Oh, yeah,
so
that's a good point.
What you ended up with was just pretty much capes and cowls because that was the one thing that comics could do better than TV and that nobody was accusing of being communist. And so, all right, there we go. It's not corrupting a kid. Here we go. There's another Superman comic for you.
Yeah.
But like, how did, as a genre, Autobio comics become a better drawn version of Ziggy?
Oh, looks like I forgot to water my flower again.
Well, here's another day where my socks don't fit.
Another day where my socks don't fit.
I don't know.
What a thing to be upset about.
Also, socks are literally designed to fit any size foot. There's no...
I just love the choice you made in that moment. That was beautiful. My socks don't fit. No, I don't know. And so can I tell you what, along with that, my other pet peeve is with Autobio comics, as long as we're talking about this?
What's that?
So I think a lot of times people look at Autobio comics and they're like, well, it's got to be like my diary. And if nothing interesting happened today, they feel the need, I think, to document that. Well, today I mowed my lawn. I mowed it first from east to west, and then I did my trimming from north to south. And now I'm out of panels, so I will see you again tomorrow. And it's like, you know what? I think the challenge of an Autobio comic isn't to document your life necessarily with 100% truthfulness, but it's to find moments in your life that are everyday and then interject some meaning into them. There's got to be a point.
Right.
By the time you get to the last panel, there's got to be a point. And there's so many pointless Autobio comics where it's just like, I went to the store today. Yep, milk is up 5 cents a gallon. The end.
See you tomorrow.
And it's like, no, that beverage has to have a meaning. There's got to be a reason you told me this. I tell this to my storytelling class all the time. By the time you get to the end of the story, you need to make it clear why you just took up this amount of time in my life. I want to know why you told me that. And if it isn't clear and if it isn't evident, you've got to come out and find a way to say it. You've got to make a point. You got to tell me why you did this. And I want to, that there's so many Autobio comics that I read that I want to take the person aside and say the same thing. It's like, you just told me a story, but it didn't have a point. And your life isn't interesting enough just on its own. It needs a point. You got to interject some meaning in there. Don't you think?
I see what you're saying. You've got to inject more art into the artifice. Like if whatever moment you are trying to capture, what is the deeper meaning? Like go deeper or frankly, even inject meaning where there is none. That might be good. But yeah, a lot of them end up either, it's weird because I understand with a lot of the kid focus or preteen comics, like those are okay being autobio because they are also a Bildungsroman, if you know that term, Brad, from literature, like a novel that teaches you about becoming an adult and teaches you about growing up, that kind of a thing. So, and that's fine. And so there's ups and downs and dramatic moments and happy moments and stuff like that. But what's weird about a lot of adult autobio comics is that they all end up feeling like Waiting for Godot. You're like, well, what happened? Why do I care about any of this? And I guess on some level, if the art, quote unquote, that you're trying to portray is like sometimes life has no meaning, sometimes there is a lot of waiting around, sometimes there's boredom, sometimes there's just sadness with no meaning. I mean, I guess that has a place, but it's weird to me that a whole genre of comics have become just that. Yeah. That you don't have an autobio comic about like, I don't know, the time that... I don't know. I a little bit feel like Old Man Yells at Cloud when I read Autobio comics. I'm like, what is this about? Why am I reading this?
No, I'll tell you, because I've kind of had firsthand experience with this. So when I was doing fables for the Philadelphia Daily News, it wasn't an autobio comic, but it was very much a journalism comic. In other words, somebody would tell me a story about something that happened to them in Philadelphia. And you think, oh, that's great. People wrote your stories for them. Well, no, if you've ever listened to somebody else tell a story, again, going back to the having a point, a lot of times these stories didn't have a point. A lot of times it was just, hey, here's this thing that happened to me. And then it was process A, B, C, and D. And it was an event. This thing happened. Right. To make fables work. And I go back and look at that stuff every now and again. And the writing, I think, holds up pretty well. To make fables work, I usually had to come in the last several panels and editorialize. Not editorialize, but I had to interject something. I had to say, this is an example of something else, or what this means is something bigger. This is a reason that Philadelphia is special, right? Or to make a commentary at some point. I had to say again, this is why I told you that. It has a meaning, and this is what that meaning is. If you just do the process, if you just do the event A, B, C, D, it's not a story. It's got to be A, B, C, D, and then why. In other words, why did I tell you this?
That was well said.
Yeah. It's you got to have the why part because otherwise you're just listing events. And again, unless your life is really super interesting on its own, which let's face it, nobody's life is interesting all the time. You got to have little moments of interest here and there, and then there's a lot of boredom. You got to find meaning in the boredom.
Well, and the problem that I often find with autobio comics is that, like, let's just pick Mark Twain out of a hat because he had an interesting life, right? He was a boat captain. He made a lot of bad investments. His life at various points did great and then fell apart and then did great, then fell apart. So Mark Twain, interesting guy. But like, if you were to write, I think he did actually just recently publish his autobiography 100 years after his death. But if I haven't read it, but if you were to read it, there's probably a sentence or two in there that said like, well, between my year 20 and year 24, I didn't do much. It was a lot of sitting around, and then I hit the road, right?
Yeah.
But it's a sentence. But the problem is, had Mark Twain been doing an autobio comic during that period, boy, we would have been seeing a lot of, well, sat on the porch again today. See you tomorrow.
I whittled a snake. It looks a little bit more like a snake than it did yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. The whittling is really coming along. Yeah. See you tomorrow. And then So I guess what I'm saying is, as a storyteller, if you're finding that that is the moment that your life is in right now, that you are in either an interregnum period between exciting events, or that maybe you're in a decade where just not a lot is happening, then maybe as a storyteller, don't choose to put the focus on that moment of your life, or turn outward, take your creativity and create a story that does have a series of events that are a series with a meaning at the end of it. You know what I mean? Like, create fiction is what I'm saying, rather than going with nonfiction that has no events to it. I mean, I guess the counter argument, Brad, would be to say, well, art like this shows everyone that we all have slow moments, boring moments, humdrum moments. But my answer to that is, well, any thinking person knows that that's a universal. I don't need to read about your trip buying a head of lettuce at the grocery store. I did that myself today. Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very, for whatever reason, I'm very unsympathetic towards Autobio comics that are, for lack of a better phrase, boring or unnecessarily
Maudlin?
filled with ennui, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and again, you can certainly say it's art because it shows that there are slow moments in life. But what I say to that is, don't expect me to read that art, because I've got lots of art that has meaning and purpose and excitement, and that's where I'm going to spend my time. So if you want to create boring art and still call it art, you may, and I'll be right there with you defending your right to call it art, but I'm never going to read it.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? It's like, so when someone makes that argument that like, well, Brad, what I'm creating is like Waiting for Godot. My counter argument is 99.99% of humanity doesn't want to go see a production of Waiting for Godot.
No.
Like,
and
Brad,
by the way, how many other plays like Waiting for Godot are there?
The reason why there's only one is because everyone everywhere agreed, like, nope, we're never doing this again. We'll allow this one to continue to exist, but we're not making another play like this.
And then, they did it. They proved it could be done, and that was enough for everybody. In fact, it was plenty.
My joke with my wife, Brad, with live theater, and especially with a play like Waiting for Godot, and I'm not even joking about this, I would pay good money to get out of going to see Waiting for Godot. There's a lot of theaters in financial trouble, and I think it's because they're doing it all wrong. Here's what you do: you charge $10 a head to come in to see something like It's a Funny Thing Happen on the Way to the Forum. At the last minute, you raise the curtain, and it's Waiting for Godot, and then it's $50 a head to get out. So, Brad, you know how the federal government sometimes, if wheat is being overproduced, they'll pay wheat farmers to not plant wheat that year? Here's me going around Los Angeles to small theater companies going, look, here's $500. Don't produce Waiting for Godot. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants to see Waiting for Godot.
But
there's a reason why this play always fails when it goes up. Don't make it. So we need a federal program to stop Autobio comics from being about when you went to buy a head of lettuce.
We need a comics subsidy Autobio comic program to pay people not to do an Autobio. We just say, okay, we get it. Your life sucks. Now give us something to read.
So I do think, though, you hit on something before, which is Autobio comics like that. I think my hunch is it tends to be produced when there is an active, viable, talented artist that hasn't yet cultivated their editorial eye. And I think that's a version of what you said, right?
Yeah.
It's like the artist is ready to go. They're ready to make comics, but there's not an internal editor going, yeah, but does this need to exist? Does anyone want to read this? Or is this? And granted, I guess if it keeps you drawing, great. Like Brad, I want to support you on your journey. Like if it's helping you to create the next thing by keeping you drawing, great. But cultivate a story, whether it is both autobiographical or fictional, that has a point. I don't know. What am I trying to say there, Brad?
You're not wrong. A story's got to have a point. Listen, I'll finish your sentence for you. If that's what keeps you drawing, and if that's what keeps you going, that's great. Just be reasonable in what you expect the outcome to be, because that's fine, that's great, but you can't expect to draw an audience doing that, because we're not going to be as interested as you are.
Right. Right.
Until you give us a reason to be interested, we're not going to be interested. And that's your job as a storyteller, is to say why this is interesting.
Yes, yes. And just to put a capstone on it, the only the only person that wants to see a production of Waiting for Godot is that professor you had. And they can't sell a full theater to that one professor. So, like that professor, maybe don't produce your auto. I don't know where I'm going with that.
I'll go with that. What was the last time there was a major production of Waiting for Godot? It was was it Steve Martin and Robin Williams played the two parts? It was like two really huge comedic actors, and you didn't go to see the play. You went to see those two people doing it.
Yes, because they took for the most part, substanceless piece of art and filled it with basically improv, mime, Jacques Lecoq type acting.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so they made it interesting yeah. Anyway. All right. Well, this has been my weekly checking in on how much does Dave hate the play Waiting on Godot. That's everybody's favorite part of the show. Turns out it's a lot.
Who would have thought? Well, listen, Dave, before we show ourselves for the Philistines that we are, let's turn to yet another Patreon question. This one sent in from a person that asks us this. It says, "Hey, guys, I was curious if ComicLab offered critiques of people's comics. I thought I heard Brad mention that he does private consultations, but I don't know if you both offered that as well on the podcast. So, Dave, what do you say? You want to do some consultations?"
Brad asked that question that way because as a friend, he knows that there are a few things that I dislike more than doing critiques and consultations of another person's art, especially a stranger.
Actually, I found the one thing you hate more than Waiting for Godot, and it's giving consultations on other people's comics.
Brad, I'd rather be hunting a fox right now. That's what I would rather be doing.
With the Cintiq.
With a Cintiq. So why I would like to break down, because we haven't talked about it in a while, why I don't like to do critiques. We all have our role in life, and some of us were born to be teachers. Brad is a very good one. I am an okay teacher when it's someone that I know, when I know a holistic view of their life and where they came from, where they want to go, and where they are in their moment in life right now, right? Mm-hmm. But I am not great. And I don't think I was put on this earth to be a hands-on teacher for whatever generic person, quote unquote, you want to put in front of me. I don't like it. I don't like critiquing other people's work. I don't like. I don't want that role. I do very much enjoy sharing what I know to people, quote unquote, broadly. I just don't want to have to deal with person individually.
Right.
What is that quote that Dostoevsky said about, was it Dostoevsky, that I love people when they're speaking broadly, but I hate people when they're in individual form? That's a terrible way to say it. Boy, and I also murdered that quote. Wow. We're learning a lot about Dave Kellis' inability to talk today.
I thought that was that agent in Men in Black where he said a person can be smart, but people are dumb.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Anyway, the bottom line is, for me personally, I really dislike the act of giving a critique. I don't enjoy it. I don't find that it betters me. I don't find that it betters the other person. I much prefer to give out advice generally that speaks to my specifics of my journey, and hope that people can either editorialize or internalize what I've given them and use it in their own journey, you know? Mm-hmm. But I can't and really dislike having to critique another person. Now, Brad, now that I've been Debbie Downer over here, you're very good at it, and you actively like to do it. And you do it both as, I've seen you do it both as a free service at Comic-Cons when people come up, and I've seen you also do it as a paid consultation online because you offer such a good advice. So what are your thoughts on doing critiques and consultations?
Well, so there's a number of them. The first of which is that a comics consultation that I offer is $200. A Patreon, you can back ComicLab on Patreon for $5. So, of course, I'm not going to do a consultation as part of Patreon. I'm giving up $195 if I do that. That would be really silly. And also, just from a common sense.
Just to make clear what would happen there, Brad's Autobio comic that day would be like, well, I gave up $195.
Yeah.
This salad is delicious. See you tomorrow.
Why would I do that? But and also, common sense, would you listen to a podcast if we were sitting there doing a consultation for somebody else's comic that you've never seen and have no idea what the comic is?
Good point.
It would be instant hot death for this podcast if we were to start going down that road. Mind you, I've done, like I said, I've done a lot of consultations, and we sit down, get on Skype for an hour and talk about stuff. And I am very, very frank, to the point of being like not vicious, but I don't sugarcoat it. And every time the person walks away thanking me, because frankly, they knew things were going on, they knew things were wrong, but nobody was willing to tell them the truth. No one was willing to, or if not the truth, this is my unvarnished opinion. This is what I really, really think, because everybody else is kind of soft toeing it, right? They're kind of tiptoeing and walking around the subject. So, that's something, but that's something that does have value, and it's something that does have worth, because I spend a little bit of time beforehand writing things up and really go drilling down deep on everything from your comic to social media and publishing. So that my time has value. That all takes a long time to put together, and to offer that through a Patreon here on ComicLab just wouldn't work. But whether it's from me or from anybody else that would be offering to give you an honest opinion, I think that sort of thing has value. I think it's worth getting somebody's honest advice, but it's not going to happen here on the show.
Right. And format wise, I think doing it on the show is hot death for podcasts, because it's like, it's a version of this for people that want to put it into different terms. It's like, I'm going to describe this salad I'm eating, Brad. Yeah. Oh, Brad, this lettuce has the most peculiar shade of green. Oh, I wish you all could see it.
You mean like a dark green? You mean like dark green?
Yeah, but it also, there's a bit of kale. Oh, and everyone's like, I'm out. I don't want to listen to this. That kind of
thing. It just wouldn't be good.
I do think I really do think in a podcast like this, and for my own sake, I think there is real value in offering generalized advice that lifts a greater tide of artists, and also helps you in more than this specific moment of this specific critique. Like a consultation or a teacher is absolutely, no doubt, has incredible value. But I think the purpose of this podcast is to give our best generalized advice to a mass audience that comes from our specific experience and the peers around us, such that you can apply it now, but also 5 years from now. You can think back and be like, well, how did they handle that? I don't remember. And, this was good advice. And so I guess what I'm saying is a critique sometimes is very specific advice of like, oh, we'll change the curve of that line. Okay, done. But I much prefer to offer generalized advice, which can be more applicable right now, and also 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. It's more like teaching a man to fish and they fish for the rest of their life kind of a thing,
Right. Well, the thing that I keep coming back to, having done this show for well over 2 years, or going on 2 years at this point.
101 episodes, Brad. 101 episodes.
But here's the thing. I keep hearing from people, and we get questions every now and again, that is like, I'll write the person back and I'll say, wait a minute, we've talked about this on the show a number of times. And the person says, oh yeah, but I thought my situation was special. So here's the deal. Every time we're talking about something, we're talking about you. And you have to figure out how we're talking about you. But I guarantee you, everything that we talk about, every topic, can be drawn a line directly to you. And you're not a special case. You don't have special dispensation. There's not a special caveat. Everything that we're talking about is involved directly with what you are doing. If you
and can I make that really personal, Brad?
Yeah.
Sometimes
please.
Brad will be giving out amazing advice, and honest to God, and I'm not kidding about this. In the back of my head, I'll be thinking, "Well, I'm a special little snowflake. I'm God's little gift to this green earth." So that Brad's advice doesn't apply to me. Yeah, that's not for me. That's for the masses, not for me. And meanwhile, I'm not that special a snowflake. I really should work on my XYZ like Brad's advising me to do. That kind of thing.
And if you're listening to this show and you think, oh, yeah, that's good point, but I do a long-form comic, that's your first mistake. I hear that all the time. I get what you're saying, but I do a long-form comic. Well, no, this applies to long-form as well as short-form. Or they'll say, well, yeah, I get it, but I'm doing sci-fi and I'm not doing humor. Same rules apply to sci-fi as they do to humor. Humor and drama, humor and sci-fi are all the same thing. It's all built on the principle of tension and release. And once you understand that, you can make it work for you. So if we're talking about humor and you think, well, I don't write humor. No. Go back and tune in. We're talking to you. And all that stuff can be directly applicable to what you're doing. But you've got to, here's the problem. And here's where the connection gets broken. You've got to take an active role in figuring out how that applies to you. And that's when it breaks down a lot of time, right? Because you're like, well, that doesn't apply to you. Or that doesn't apply to me. And it does. It really does. So the fact that here's the other part, in a metaphysical way, we've already given you a consultation on your comic. You just have to put it together.
Ah, that's a nice way to put it.
And you know what? I know it sounds like smug and everything, but it really is the truth.
You know what that a little bit sounded like to me, Brad. This podcast was the friends we made along the way. That's right. So you've already been given the gift you needed, and then you just disappear into pure light and descend into heaven. You're like, or ascend into heaven. You're like, bye. I've been Brad Geiger. Bye.
But I just do that animated GIF of Homer walking backwards into the shrubbery.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also know, and I say this in friendship, if I'm at a Comic-Con or a book signing or an appearance, I do genuinely ask this as a friendship. Maybe I will do it if you ask me to critique your work, but I really, just as a human, I don't enjoy it. It's a process that, and Brad can speak to this, he's seen me give critiques at shows because I try to be kind, but I really... just as something that I don't enjoy doing, but just as a friend, please don't ask me to do critiques because I don't enjoy it for 1,000 reasons. Why are you laughing?
It makes you so uncomfortable that you can't even talk about it without. I can see you shriveling up in your chair as you're talking over there. You're uncomfortable even talking about how uncomfortable you are.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not wrong. It's for whatever reason, and it is just a fault or a wrinkle in my personality. I don't like to critique other artists or other human beings. So,
no, here's your fault. Here's your fault. You're filled with love and puppy dog kisses and hearts, and I'm filled with bile and yuck. So you don't like doing that because you're filled with too much happiness. But me, it's like, oh yeah, you want to find out what you're doing wrong? Sit down next to me. Get ready.
You know what though? I think accidentally you might have actually hit on the truth in the sense that there's a part of my personality. No, not about you. I'm just saying like about me. God, I realized what I was saying. No, what I'm saying is about me is that there's a big part of my heart that just wants everyone to like me. And I feel like if I critique them, they're not going to like me. So that's just a very human reaction there that I just don't enjoy the process. Like I'll do it if you really want me to at a Comic-Con. I don't enjoy it. So anyway, I don't know where that's going other than it'll make me sound so sad.
And the only reason you say that you'll do it is that you don't want them to dislike you for saying that you won't do it, because you just got done saying, I'll do it, but I really hate to do it. Please don't ask me to do it, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute. How about Dave? How about you just say the words out loud? I don't want to do it. Don't ask me. It's not my thing.
Brad, you know me well enough that I can't speak assertively like that.
I'm sitting here with bated breath. I'm like, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it?
No. Remember how I said when I get nervous and anxious, I get sweaty? Guess what? I'm back in my underwear again, Brad. It's Christmas morning at 1 a.m. Thanks a lot, champ. I'm anxiously sweating again.
Well, you know what happens. As soon as Dave's down to his underwear, it's time to end the show. So I'm going to say you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been the fully clothed Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And the nicely nearly naked David Kellett, co-director of Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive, as in drive on over, at drivecomic.com.
Well, and this week's sponsor again, and through the rest of 2019, we thank them so much, the good folks at Wacom at wacom.com. Sorry, Wacom, that I was talking about my underwear a second ago.
They must be so proud.
They're like, guess who's not re-upping for 2020, everybody? And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from my delightful friend Andy Creighton over at theworldrecord.net. And I don't know that I've ever said it before, but really go check out Andy's music at theworldrecord.net.
Oh, yeah.
He is a delightful human being, and his albums are fantastic. So theworldrecord.net for Andy. And this episode and all episodes was edited by the ever-delightful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab, so we're going to say that twice, patreon.com/comiclab.
All right, Brad, so here's the kicker. Now I'm anxiously in my undies, and suddenly you throw a fox into the ring. What do I do?
Oh, boy.
There's something worse about having to fight a wild animal nude. Like, that's where you're like, this is not what I evolved to do.
Well, yeah, because first of all, you've got to cover up, and the second of all, the animals always laugh at you. You ever see a fox? You ever see a fox just snicker away at your perceived inadequacies?
The fox just takes a photo on his phone and goes, "That's going right to Instagram."
You wait till the boys see this.